Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our eclipses that are coming up. We have kind of a wild month of March ahead of us, and this is going to be maybe a two-part video where I start with just our lunar eclipse, which is coming up March 13th and 14th, and then maybe part two will be the solar eclipse 2 weeks from there on the 29th of March. So our eclipse here in Hawaii will be visible. We have a start time of around 5:57 p.m. So that's, going to be as the sun isn't quite down yet. And then it goes until 12 a.m. the next day on the 14th. We have our max point of the eclipse at 8:58 p.m. And the time the sun and the moon are going to be across from each other and the actual full moon is going to be 8:52 p.m. Hawaii time. So this is an eclipse that is really showing us this bridge between our new moon that we just had in Aquarius and moving that energy into Pisces, as well as the axis of Leo into Virgo, because the sun and the moon are actually going to be the very end of Aquarius and Leo in this full moon. And immediately afterwards, like less than an hour, the moon is in Virgo, where the eclipsing node is. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because this is really important. The eclipsing node is still in Virgo. And it's at very early degrees here at 3 degrees. And you can see the moon here is at 29:43. So 30 degrees, it's in the next sign. And this is a total lunar eclipse. So the node is so close, despite there being this difference of signs, that the moon will be completely obscured by the shadow of the earth between the sun and the moon. So in a full moon, the sun is illuminating the moon across the way. And in an eclipse, the earth has like crossed into that pathway. And it's literally a calculation of when these three orbs will line up and their points in space, K2, the south node, and Rahu, the north node. So we can see that at the end of Leo here, we're reckoning with our power. And it's a reflection of the power we haven't been holding in this Aquarius cycle, right? We've been allowing the power to be more diffused. We've felt unseen. We felt hidden. We've felt ourselves behind the scenes, if you will, and been in service, as Aquarius is this really humanitarian sign. And yet we need to see the ways in which we have to hold power also. Because in every cycle, we want to look at the opposite. There's no one sign that's like, that's the best sign, and the other sign is bad. That's not the way it works. We are all made up of the mandala of the different signs, and we need that juxtaposition. We need the opposite energy to bring us back to balance. And so we've been in this humble arena, and particularly with the joint planetary energy of Saturn in his own sign, who's been holding court here for 2 years, we've really felt into that humility, and we've really felt into the slow pacing of things, how long it takes for things to change, and how much we have to be committed, and how much the hard work is necessary, and how humble we have to be in the process, and how much pain and suffering there is along the way. And as we can recall, the new moon was in a star of Satyabhishak, where we were seeing the corruption, we were seeing what's wrong. And now we have this full moon that's, the moon moves quickly. So it's passed through all the different stages of Leo, the part where we're connected to source, the part where we're reveling in our power. And now we're in Uttara Falguni, which is the same nakshatra that's going to carry us into Virgo. We can see Ketu is also in Uttara Falguni. This is the star of marriage. It's the star of contracts and commitments beyond the love and pleasure, beyond the delight, and moving into the more serious end of things, particularly as we get into the Virgo side, where we make agreements and we reckon with the details of how are all those things that we want going to actually work. If we think of, kings of yesteryear marrying somebody from another place, another land, and bringing together the two kingdoms. And how is that actually going to work? What are the negotiating points? and how are we going to get there? And so this is where we see that power turning into organization, details, and this adeptness and skill that K2 brings to the table is going to be eclipsing our moon, our heart, our feelings, and our emotions. K2 doesn't just bring skill, though, right? K2 brings disgust, irritation. Wherever K2 is, we're actively avoiding that area. So for the last year, we've been actively avoiding the details. We've been actively looking away from this place in our chart, whatever house Virgo is for you. And this is why I do these star reports for all the signs, because it's very different for each of us. If you're a Gemini rising, it's your fourth house. If you're a Virgo rising, it's your first house, right? And if you're a Pisces, it's your seventh. And so this is going to change the area of your life that it affects. Is it you that you've been looking away from while you focus on relationships on the other end where Rahu is? Or is it your relationships that you've been looking away from and avoiding the compromise and avoiding that? And in which case, this is an opportunity to look at how that has caused you difficulty, right? How that has created difficulty for you, and how you can come into agreements that work and make everybody feel as though their needs are being met. And so this leap, and again, I mean, I'll do the hour just because I know it'll happen, but look, we're already in here just an hour later, and it's less than an hour even that it changes, and then the moon is in Virgo also. And so we go through the whole period of this Purnima Titi, this full moon phase in Leo. So we're really embodied in that powerful stage. And then we move to the end of it and we're like, oh, but our power has limits, right? Our power is not just whatever we want. It has to make sense, not just to the whole population that we've been working with in this Aquarius cycle, but also to the individuals that we're making deals with. That's how power works. We can hold power over a population for only so long if the population doesn't feel as though we're doing it in a right way, where we're actually honoring everybody in the society. And we can only hold power in an interpersonal relationship, or even have those partners and those allies that help us take our bigger, broader power scheme out, if we are making agreements that work for everybody and that take care of the details we may not have been paying attention to. And this sign of Virgo is the sign of our health. It's the sign of our capacity to pay attention to our physical actual reality of what can go wrong. So this can be in our body, this can be in our house, where the places where the corners we haven't cleaned, the drawers we haven't organized. This can be in our accounting with our finances, the numbers that we haven't been plugging in and making meet, making the equations come to the right totals. We can see the places where we've avoided the details. And in this eclipse and in a full moon period, we have that, again, that reflection of what we haven't been doing. But in these eclipse cycles, it becomes very powerful. And it's not just right now what we haven't been doing. It's like for a long time, K2 has to do with our past information, our past wisdom from a long time ago, our early childhood, from our past lives, from this previous place where we used to spend a lot of energy, and now we're avoiding it because we feel like we've done that already and we're annoyed by it. We're like, I've already taken care of the details. Now I just want to do this Piscean thing and check out and have this spiritual awakening, and I'm not really interested in looking, crossing my T's and dotting my I's. I feel like I did that a long time ago and I don't want to upkeep it. But of course, Virgo is a place where you have to upkeep. You can't just take care of your health one day 10 years ago and expect to be healthy 10 years later. You need to constantly eat healthy food. You need to constantly take care of yourself with different, herbal remedies or massage or acupuncture. You have to regularly tend to the details of your home and your life and your finances and all of the things. And this is what we may not have been looking at. That's going to be shed some light on, and it's going to shed light on how that can damper our power, right? A king whose health is ailing is not going to be a very strong king. Nobody's going to respect or revere somebody who's nearing their deathbed because they haven't cared for their health. And so we see also how our power can really go awry if we haven't dealt with the things of this house of Virgo. And of course, again, for each of us, it will be different in our chart. So while the moon moves in an hour later, the sun takes a little bit longer, but moves in on the 14th. It's in the morning here. So it's Mercury who goes retrograde in the evening. That's right. So we have the sun moving in at 3:22 a.m. Hawaii time, actually on the 14th. So not too long after the eclipse. The eclipse was happening at 8:52 p.m. on the 13th, and here on the 14th at 3:22 a.m. And we're 3 hours earlier than California time or Pacific time at this point because we had daylight savings time on the 9th. So usually when I give my reports for the past little stretch of time since November, it's been a 2 hour time difference. Now it's a 3 hour one because we don't honor that time difference or that time change here in Hawaii. So the sun's moved into Pisces, and we are now carrying into a cycle where we're holding our power in a different way. Now, this is a place where the sun can actually be quite powerful in Pisces because we're very connected to source. We're very connected to the higher purpose and meaning, particularly without all the rules and regulations that can sometimes create problems and arguments and discord amongst the people in which we hold power. In Pisces, we are often not really trying to hold power, right? Pisces has a sixth house relationship with Leo, the ruler of the sun, or excuse me, the sign the sun rules. And so there's a disinterest, a dislike of holding power. It's like power is not divided among people and power is not held by kings. Power just is. It's your connection to source. You're either streaming that power and acknowledging that it's in your hands and it's in nature and it's all around you, or you're not, you don't understand power, right? It's not something that people give you or you take. It's inherent and we all have it and we get it from the sun. And this is that understanding. And so it can be very strong here in that sense. But of course, we have Rahu, we have this node. And as soon as the sun moves into Rahu's path, we start to feel our power, this sort of anxiousness around our leadership, around our power, around that connection to source that feels like it's so direct and clean, except for Rahu's kind of frenetic and has a lot of stops and starts. Whenever we see Rahu near the sun, we can also say that we might have things like power stops and starts, like with, electricity, with our power that we use for our lives. And so we might find that there's actual issues with our connectivity in a very tangible, real way, not just our connection to source, but also our power sources that we use, our outlets and our way of receiving light and electricity and things like that. So this is going to be a period of time that is going to reflect that. And then, of course, Mercury is going to begin his retrograde cycle by the evening. And I think it was like almost the same time as the eclipse the day before. So on the 13th at 8:52, we had that full moon. And here we have Mercury going retrograde at 8:52 on, and it might not be exactly 8:52 because I did the 10-minute thing, but very close to that time, Mercury begins his retrograde cycle, joining Venus, right? Mercury and Venus together, both retrograde. Venus exalted, Mercury debilitated. So these two planets in a place where they're not, they normally, well, Venus normally can help Mercury here. We can usually have this assistance that Venus provides, where we call it Nicha Bhanga. It's where an exalted planet, and it's not always the case that it's an exalted planet, but where some planet that's in a good standing helps the planet that is in its more challenged state. Mercury is challenged in Pisces because we can get confused with our communication. We can get confused with the ideas and our understanding of facts and information in this big ocean that is Pisces. They can get lost. When Mercury retrogrades in Pisces, it can be beneficial because we take a little longer. We're like, I am a little confused. Maybe I need to take some time to work through this, or maybe I need to go back over and make sure I did dot all my I's and cross all my T's, or I did actually send that email, or I put the address in right, or whatever the different things are. Maybe I need to review this a little. So it can help us in that sense. With Venus going retrograde, it's not beneficial because Venus is in our highest state in Pisces, and our capacity to love beyond reason, our capacity to find happiness beyond the details and just in the oneness is so high. And when it's inverted, when it's retrograde, we start having to go back over that and being like, are my needs being met? And, was that just an illusion or fantasy? It becomes more of an internalized thing that's very focused. Now, both of these planets are also getting very much closer to the sun, which will happen more around our second eclipse. I'll talk more about them being really close to the sun. So there's a lot of power in retrograde planets because we are internalizing the energy and kind of hyper focusing on it in a way. But at the same time, their expression in the world is usually hindered. And in the case of Mercury, for example, that might not be a bad thing. In the case of Venus, it's less beneficial. Well, we also have here the fact that Jupiter is in Venus's sign of Taurus. So Venus and Jupiter are in this exchange of signs, but also Jupiter's the ruler of Pisces. So all of these planets are being affected by Jupiter being in Taurus. Pisces is this land of like illusion and fantasy and oneness and spirit and connectivity. And, the drop is in the ocean and the ocean is in the drop and all of this kind of high-minded and sometimes very confusing and muddled form of connection to source. Well, Jupiter's in Taurus, where we're very grounded, very materially oriented. We want our food. We want actually room service, or a nice meal. We don't just want like some gruel in a bowl. We want our food to be pleasing. We want it to be beautiful. We want it to be tasty. We want pleasures of the body. We want to take baths and feel relaxation and have massages. We want to have sensuality and pleasure with other people. And our focus is on ourself in this part of the zodiac. We get more involved with other people in Venus's other sign of Libra. But we still care enough about how the other person's feeling because we recognize how it affects ourselves and we recognize how it affects our own experience of pleasure and happiness. And so this earthly grounding is a very interesting place for the ruler of this Piscean experience to be because we're like really trying to find a raft somewhere, ideally a yacht. And in the meantime, we're kind of out at sea and we don't know where land is, let alone a hotel. And we're just kind of swirling around in this place that Rahu has been building for the last year, bringing this very airy energy, this exaggerated energy to this sea that can be calm, but is it going to be calm with Rahu in it? Probably not. And also, is it going to be calm with so much energy in it? Right? If it's just the sun there, or it's just Venus there, or it's just Venus, Mercury, and the sun even, it can be much calmer. But having Rahu's presence there is going to create a lot more of a whirlwind effect because the nodes, not only do they chase the sun and the moon, right? Ketu and Rahu have this mythology, this story of how they were ratted out by the sun and the moon and they're forever chasing them. And this is how this is why they eclipse the orbs. Are luminaries. But there's also this quality that the nodes have where they take on the personality and qualities and characteristics of the grahas that they're joined. So when Rahu is joined the sun, it magnifies our sense of power. It magnifies that masculine energy of really holding power and shining bright. When Rahu is joined Venus, it really magnifies our beauty and our sensuality and our perhaps sense of fantasy and illusion, particularly, in Pisces. When Rahu is joined Mercury, it can really exaggerate our words and it can create more chaos and confusion in this place. So each of those things are being affected by Rahu's presence. And of course, the sun is the one at this point that's the closest to them. The other ones have moved through Rahu's gate and are retrograding now back towards it. So we're going to have more opportunities to have the Rahu on Venus magnification of the beauty, but of course it will be retrograde the first time and then direct again. We'll have that same experience with Mercury where we have this chance to kind of experience the specific energies each getting magnified at these junctures, but the sun is the first one to get hit. And this is going to be pretty close, right? Even by the 17th, and this is later in the day here, we have Sun and Rahu joined. So I just did a live discussion with my member group. This is 7:52 a.m. on March 17th when they're exact. And in my member group, we had like four of us that have our birthdays from the 15th to the 17th. Mine is on the 16th. And I think two of them were on the 17th. And we're just like, wow, okay, we're it's our little birthday surprise and a little present. I'm thinking few are right after the eclipse. And on the other hand, the eclipse is the actual experience where the moon, sun, and earth line up. But the node being right on the sun like this is going to have very strong effect on things around related to power and things related to like I said, the actual power that we see manifested through our electricity, but also our own relationship with power, whether that's your father or a parent, or whether that's your boss, or whether that's on a bigger scale with the government or some kind of official that has power over you. This is a very interesting time to have that connection, because it is right. It's after the eclipse, but we're still in this window of eclipse. And this whole period of time, the whole period that we're already in right now, and after the 29th, the second eclipse, we're going to be in this eclipse window. But this period from eclipse A to eclipse B is like, it's like, wow, 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 wow. We're like in this very interesting tunnel of time where everything feels a little illusory. We have a lot of stories, a lot of magnification, a lot of things that seem to be maybe different than they are. And this is one of the most important things to recognize, is that, things are different than we think they are. Like, we have a tendency to really put a lot of stock in what we witness with our own eyes, what information we get given. And we're like, okay, this is what's at. And if you saw my last video from Shivaratri, from the new moon in Aquarius, I talk about that a little bit with the puzzle pieces. I'm holding these puzzle pieces, you're holding those puzzle pieces. Your pieces are not wrong, they do fit in the puzzle, and my pieces are not wrong, they do fit in the puzzle. But the perceptions, the stories, the ideas that we make up based on our own little picture of the puzzle without seeing the other person's picture of the puzzle, it really creates the discord that we see. It creates a lot of disagreements. It creates a lot of huge arguments. It creates whole wars, right? It creates so much of the chaos we experience in this world. And so the more we can kind of slow our roll, and luckily Venus and Mercury can help us with that a little, because there is that retrograde slowing down action, particularly in our relationships, since Mercury and Venus are both very relational planets. We have an opportunity to kind of say, okay, wait, I don't have the full picture, and I don't actually know what you know. So maybe we could share some information and get a little bit bigger picture. But of course, we still have all these other pieces to the puzzle that we don't have and we won't have. And what's interesting with all these planets piling into Pisces, you can see it's right away. I mean, by March 17th, we already had theirs there. The thing that's really getting added on at the end of the March 29th solar eclipse is we're going to have the moon in there, obviously, because it's a new moon. The moon and sun will be together, but Saturn is moving in right after. And so that's going to be, like I said, part 2 video, so that these videos aren't too long. But what's really interesting is that, there is this kind of energy of Pisces. It's the last sign of the zodiac. There's the lightning flash, the sort of fiery energy of Purva Bhadrapada, the first nakshatra of Pisces, where we're awakening to our reality, like we're more than this body, we're in an illusion. And then the second nakshatra, Uttara Bhadrapada, is more gentle. And it does have this kind of deep penetrative energy where we need to go down deep and do that final reckoning with our subconscious in order to really find the peace to walk ourselves home in Revati in the final nakshatra. But with Rahu there and all the planets, it's like we've taken this peaceful cruise and we ended up in the Bermuda Triangle. And now we're just like swirling around in this whirlpool, and it's chaotic. But it doesn't need to be. We have the opportunity to use the tools at our disposal to look where we haven't been looking. That Virgo, which is again where the full moon actually is Leo to Virgo immediately. And we have a chance to see, like, okay, our power is not just something we hold, it's something we have inherently. Well, how do we access that? Through these different practices that we do, through simple things like breathing, eating balanced meals 3 times a day, getting up and doing some kind of exercise or your yoga asana, saying mantra perhaps, or meditating, taking walks, moving the right and left sides of the brain, swimming in water, all these different techniques that we have at our disposal, whether or not you're, in any kind of tradition, you can exercise, breathe, and eat well, right? So these kind of things that we do help ground us in our body and they help land us somewhere. And it's going to be very important with Jupiter and Taurus, right? Our health is very important. Even though we might have been getting gluttonous, we might have been eating too much, we might have been getting a little bit, too much in the pleasure zone. But our desire for health is there, and Jupiter is giving his reflection upon the moon a little bit later because Jupiter's in late degrees Taurus, so the reflection on the moon will be after the eclipse for sure when the moon is already moved, a day or two later. But we have this chance to really tune into our bodies and tune into our physical needs, and not from this kind of gluttonous place, but from a place of like, what have I been avoiding? What have I been ignoring? What about my health have I been ignoring? What about my body have I been ignoring? What about my finances have I been ignoring? And how can I tend to those details without becoming obsessed with them? So this is another thing that I talked about yesterday with my group, is that sometimes, and this is really different depending on what spiritual community you circle in, but particularly in the Vedic community, there's a high emphasis on remedy. And this can include a number of mantras every day or at specific times of day. This can include a lot of different Ayurvedic practices that one might do. This might, have to do with certain times that you wake and certain clothes you wear and when you take a bath and what you eat on this day and all of these different things. And it's very valuable and important to have routine and schedule and things that you're holding to. But the problem comes when we put too much on those practices. Like being spiritual in itself is, doing these Ayurvedic practices and saying these mantras. And like, this is what being spiritual is. We should not confuse, what is that saying? Like that, what the finger is pointing at for the moon itself. Like, we're doing these things to bring ourself into a specific state of mind that's more conducive to having the Piscean experience. And the Piscean experience is where a lot of other people hang out, right? And there's a whole new age community of people who kind of believe everything, and they teach classes on 7 different goddesses from all the different cultures, and it's all one, and everything is kind of jumbled jambled, and there isn't a lot of clarity or even education around any element of it. And it's kind of just, anything that I feel like is spiritual in this moment, and there isn't any kind of lineage or attachment to things that really brings a through line through it. So there's these two sides. And again, one is not better than the other, but we need both. And so if you lean towards the side of being obsessed with your practices and being obsessed with that, if I just pray enough times and I do all these things, then everything's going to be okay, maybe lean back from that a little and look at what those practices are trying to bring you to. What is the point of that? The point is in the bowing down. It's not just in saying those perfect mantras with the perfect intonation at that perfect time. And if you lean towards being kind of spacey and out there and everything goes, maybe ground a little bit in some routine and something that brings you to a specific steady rhythmic lineage that isn't just all over the place. And this is a way to bring balance in this time. And of course, that's why I do these reports for all 12 signs, why I have these member discussions, these live discussions for all of the different signs. And we use members charts because everybody's experience is different. We're not all having the same experience. And it's really important to understand that what house this is happening in your chart is different for each of us. And so if you are a Virgo or a Gemini, this is happening in your first or fourth house, this full moon lunar eclipse. Like I said, we're going to talk about the solar eclipse afterwards, but you have to understand that planetary pileup is happening either in your 10th house or your 7th house if you're one of those Mercury ruled rising signs. And then for all the other signs, it's in a different place too. And it's fundamental to understanding astrology to know this. How is it showing up in my life? because it's not just aimlessly showing up in the same way it is for everyone else. So if you're interested in that, you can go to patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology, and sign up for my Cosmically Aligned tier. This is the group where I offer every week different forecast reports for all the 12 signs. So if any planets changing signs or going retrograde, or there's a full moon or a new moon, I write that out for each of the signs. And then I also do these live discussions where we really dive deep for each of the signs. You know, we talk for 10, 15 minutes about what it is for each sign and for the individual people who submit their charts. So it's a lot of fun, and it's also a great way to really understand what it is that's happening, because all of this is here for us to understand. It's happening whether or not we understand it, right? So it's up to us to choose to find that deep penetrative understanding where we're not just kind of putting band-aids on a problem or seeking out quick remedies to things so that we can resolve and get the result we want. We actually start to have a deeper spiritual understanding that we're not here to get what we want, right? We're here to move closer to truth. So I wish you a blessed full moon lunar eclipse, and I will see you soon for the new moon solar eclipse report. Namaste.